Iron City built. It's time for the Steel City Nation podcast. Here's your host, Mark Maraday.
I want to welcome my guest tonight. It's Dan Kingerski from Pittsburgh Hockey Now. How you doing, Dan?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me.
I really appreciate you being on the show. I'm going to get right after it. You being a hockey guy, I know you were in the bubble. Can you share with people what it was like in that bubble? Because I know a lot of people were interested.
You know, that's the thing. I've had to kind of explain this to Paul Zeiss and others here in Pittsburgh, too. I wasn't technically in the bubble. The NHL allowed only 3 NHL.com reporters inside the hotel bubble.
Okay.
So I was allowed into the arena. I was one of 5 American journalists who crossed the border, who made it past customs and all of that fun stuff. I was one of 5 U.S. journalists to make that trip and cover it in the arena, and that was surreal. Watching the arena folks play with the crowd noise and sitting there in an entirely empty arena. I don't know if you had a chance to see my pictures on Twitter of the media room.
Yeah.
There were like 10 chairs set up, all 6 feet apart, but only me sitting in there with all these camera lights on me. It was, I don't think, I don't know how to describe it other than surreal, and hopefully we never have to do it again.
I was listening today to the Fan this morning, and they were talking about how the NHL, and I'm sure you know this already, wants to play their 82-game season next year starting in January. And it would still end in what, somewhere around the end of July or something like that, or somewhere in August? I mean, sounds like the mighty dollar's talking there.
Well, not just the mighty dollar. I think there's a human need to get back to some sort of normalcy.
Right.
Right now, the next season, the 2021 season, is penciled in to begin on December 1st. If we do get that sort of that vaccine by October, right, or by the 1st, which is what the CDC told their folks to expect, then we probably can start a season early in December, finish it up sometime in July, and I think that would make people on just some level happy,
right.
not the extra money, because don't get me wrong, this flat salary cap is crushing players and owners and team employees alike. There's a lot of people losing their jobs or being downsized or having their salaries slashed, but
sure.
And I think it's just the indomitable human spirit wants to play 82 games next year.
I saw you wrote today, did they trim the budget like $7 million on that cap for next year? Did I read that correctly?
Well, no, the Penguins have $7 million left.
Okay.
If they do spend to the cap. Look, Mark, we had sources tell us a few days after the season, and the folks who told us this were telling us this for weeks, and I kind of put off printing it because I didn't want to I didn't think the story was right during the playoffs,
right,
or the season. But the folks who have seen the books, the Penguins are not in great shape because of this, because they lost last year in just, got only 2 playoff games.
Right.
They took a bath in 2019 and no home playoff games in 2020 with the absence of, 7 or 8 regular season games. So there's a lot of money missing from the coffers. Now, the owners have publicly said they're going to spend to the cap. We'll see. I think that'll be forgotten by next December, or this December rather, if they can or if they can't. So they have $7 million to, in theory, sign Tristan Jarry, Jared McCann, Dominic Simone, Sam Lafferty, find a third pairing defenseman. So they've got a lot of work to do and a little money to do it.
I certainly hope they make the right moves to be able to sign the right people there, though. I'm a little concerned about a couple of those guys. I'm going to ask you about them a little bit later. But let me ask you this. Do you think not having those fans in the stands might have impacted a team like, say, the Pens, the Caps, even like Edmonton or Toronto? You think that might have had an impact on them? those teams seem to thrive off of an environment to a certain degree.
The team that it affected the most, I think, were the Boston Bruins. They talked about the atmosphere a lot. Oh, the weird atmosphere, the weird atmosphere. The other teams, it was quite interesting. And one of these days, I'll get some people on the record or some people to tell me the full story, because right now, I think we only have a quarter of the story. But I'll give you a little bit of a scoop that I haven't published.
Okay.
The Penguins, a handful of guys who just, after they lost Game 4, packed up and left, just bolted from the bubble. They didn't care to be there. Jim Rutherford made reference, a subtle reference to them as well. Like, we had some guys who didn't want to be there in the bubble. But it was kind of a rift amongst players on all teams.
Oh.
You know, guys just didn't want to do this, right? So yeah, you had some players and you had team leadership trying to overcome that. And I don't know was it a distraction? Was it a downplay? Or, I don't know, but certainly some of the teams were definitely not at full strength.
You think the Pens actually respected Montreal, though? I mean, they were the 12th team in the Eastern Conference. They had, the worst record going into this thing? Or was it just Carey Price? I mean, they've always struggled with Carey Price to a certain degree.
Well, no, I think if you look at the first couple of games, the Penguins fired, 96 shot attempts towards Carey Price in Game 1?
Yeah.
And no, I think what got the Penguins was their fragile mental state. When they were pushed, when they were challenged by Carey Price, they folded. They owned the Montreal team. The skaters owned the Montreal skaters quite effectively. But when they, push came to shove and they needed more, they packed it in rather than giving more, which so separates this 2020 team from the Stanley Cup contenders of 16 and 17 that would just give more reflexively, not have to ask for it, not have to be told to give more. This team just wouldn't give it even when asked.
I think, in my opinion, you missed that tough, gritty veteran that would get in there and do some of that work. And as much as I like Patrick Marleau, and Lord knows everybody likes Patrick Marleau, he was not an answer to come in and bring that let's win it for Patrick thing like a lot of people wanted that to be. Would you agree?
Yeah. I thought, boy, a rival GM a couple days before the trade deadline told us that Wayne Simmons was the answer for the Penguins and said, that they were going to get him. He felt that the Penguins were going to acquire him. That turned out not to be. The Penguins chose Patrick Marleau. And, I have to tell you, I didn't see anything from Marleau on the ice or off the ice. It just was very laissez-faire, kind of a really bad match that provided the Penguins nothing on the ice that they needed, and certainly not off the ice that they needed.
It seemed like his wife was more behind him being with the Penguins and his kids than he ever did. I mean, she blew up Twitter quite a bit about the excitement that her and the kids had. You really never, like you said, you never heard much from Patrick. And that's not to say he hasn't been a great player through the ages, but, will he even return next year? Not with the Penguins, but in the NHL. That's what you gotta wonder now.
Well, I think at this point in his life, it's San Jose or bust.
Yeah.
And what does San Jose have? I don't know why they would need him. I think he's going to be retired here in December rather than playing. That's my 2 cents. That didn't come from Patrick for sure.
So now, like the assistants, not that I think a lot of fans really had a problem with this, but we got in the assistants. We bring in Reardon. We bring in Bellucci. Is that a good move by them, or is that like part of the scapegoat mentality there for them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't know. They're really high on what Todd Reardon can bring as an assistant coach. I personally have been very impressed with Mike Vellucci in the conversations that he and I have had, a couple through the pandemic. You know, he was kind enough to take my calls and talk about some of the prospects. Really, you know, P.O. Joseph being chief among those.
Yeah,
He loved P.O.
Me too. I talked with Angie Carducci about him several different times. He was on the podcast a while ago, and we talked about him. I'm very high on him. I saw him play several times up at Hershey because I live close to Hershey. Saw him even up in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton. Think the kid's got great game. Might need to gain about 20 pounds.
Yeah, he needs a few cheeseburgers. I'll put him on my diet.
Yeah, there you go.
His game needs a little bit more maturation. I don't think he'll be ready for the start of this coming season. But boy, you know, he picks things up so quickly, and he's so eager, and he's just everything that you want in a prospect. And you know, a lot of scouts were split on him, Mark, both when he was drafted and acquired by the Penguins. You know, we had some OHL and Q scouts tell us he's never going to see the NHL. I think he's going to be a pretty solid top four defenseman, you know, very much in the Trevor Daley, you know, the best of Justin Schultz sort of mode, where he can skate and move the puck and do a lot of things very well. What were we talking about before then? But Vellucci, I think Bellucci's got a little bit of Badger Bob Johnson in him.
Nice.
I'm not saying a lot. You know, that's really high. I don't know if his hockey acumen is quite to the professor, but his person is Badger Bob. That relentlessly positive, looking forward, let's build it together kind of attitude that he has. That very easy, approachable mentality. I can't say enough good things about Vellucci, quite frankly, and I'm excited for him to get his first crack at the NHL, and I hope he does well.
I'm wondering, and I've been wondering this since they hired those two guys, Vellucci winning a championship in the AHL with the Checkers, 2 years ago, Reardon having the pedigree, and I personally, I live in that DC area. I think they made him the scapegoat down here. I'm wondering if, you know, how many games Sullivan gets into this season, and if he's not doing what needs to be done, you know, will they pull the plug on him and move one of those guys forward?
Well, they really can't move Todd Reardon up. I mean, in reality, I guess they kind of could, but he was really outcoached in DC. They realized that he's a great assistant coach, but maybe not the head man kind of guy. Also, don't forget, the Penguins have a lot invested in Mike Sullivan financially.
Sure.
The easy thing to do would have been to, you know, separate this offseason and let him go find another job. If they terminate him during the season, he's going to sit on the sidelines until next summer, and the Penguins are on the hook for all of that money. So if the Penguins are to remove Sullivan, it will be with cause plus.
Okay.
You know, they're going to have to really think the change is absolutely 110% necessary before Sullivan is removed. So
let me ask you this then. Did you sense him losing that locker room at all, or at least the key elements in that locker room?
No, I really didn't. I think the guys, you know, look at the injury results.
Yeah.
When the Penguins were decimated with injuries, Mark, they played some of the best hockey in the NHL. They were unbeatable without Sidney Crosby or without Evgeny Malkin, without Kris Letang or without Brian Dumoulin, without, you know, Justin Schultz, without Hugstad. I could go on. They were tough and they were engaged, but something happens when Voltron comes together. You know, when all the Lions form the big unit, something they lose something in translation there. I don't think it's disrespect for Sullivan so much as it's almost an assumption of greatness or an assumption of winning.
Okay.
And they lose that eye of the tiger, so to speak.
You know what? It kind of reminds me now, back in the day when I lived in the Pittsburgh area over 20 some years ago, I had season tickets, and you know, it was back in the when Mario was playing, and you would see that happen so frequently. They would work so hard, and then Mario would get plugged back in the lineup, and everybody was kind of like, ooh, he's back. Let's let him work his magic.
Well, you're exactly right. And that's whatever it is. Hockey has this entirely ethereal plane that can't really be quantified beforehand.
Right.
And, you can put all the players together. You can count their Corsi, and you can add up all of the expected results. But there's just something intangible about hockey and chemistry. And when you plug it all together, sometimes the sum is greater than the parts, or in the case of the Penguins, now that they've won a few Stanley Cups, I think the sum is less than the sum of the parts.
Sure. Willen and Dylan Jim. He goes out, he gets himself Kasperi Kapanen, okay? Is this kind of I don't know what you would even call this move. It happened so quickly, and then he tries to justify it. There were 6 teams bidding on him. What's your gut instinct tell you about that little deal?
In what context? I can probably talk quite a bit about that. Look, Carolina has been trying to pry Kapanen out of Toronto for the better part of the last 12 months.
Oh.
And they couldn't do it. Toronto didn't want to sell. Carolina was upping the ante, upping the offer, and they could never quite pry him out of Toronto.
Okay.
So now push comes to shove. Carolina is right there. They looked at the price the Penguins were willing to pay and said, no, thank you. And I forget who has the 17th. Carolina has the 17th pick. I forget who has the 13th pick. Also was very interested in Kapanen. Perhaps it was Edmonton. And Edmonton made a strong run, but would not part with that first-round pick for him. You factor then that Elliot Friedman followed up the trade with reporting that GMs were shocked at how much Kapanen fetched, and nobody else was willing to pay it. So it doesn't look great for Jim Rutherford on the price he paid for Kapanen. And now that the Penguins are into the second phase of their offseason, in that they must shed salary and get better and do all these things, they don't have the ammunition. They don't have the bullets to do it. Right. And they spent it all on Kapanen. So I don't like the trade for that reason. It has nothing to do with Kapanen as a player. I think he's going to be a fine top sixer. Maybe he's more like a Zucker, where he can play a top 9, shuffle around, whatever. Maybe he's a 25 goal scorer. But they paid a king's ransom for that guy. And unfortunately, they're going to regret it.
I think they will down the road, too. It makes me very nervous about the way this team is structured going forward, especially because at the minor league level, they really don't have any significant prospects. I mean, who stands out for you at the minor league level now?
They don't have anybody in Wilkes-Barre besides P.O. Joseph.
Yeah.
Maybe Nicholas Almari as defenseman. He might make the NHL in a couple or few years. He's another one of those methodical, smooth, Swedes. But other than that, I'm actually, as we're talking here, I'm looking up. Carolina has the 13th pick, and I'm trying to see who has the 17th pick. Anyway. Almari has a chance to get to the NHL in a couple or a few years. Sam Miletic is an interesting prospect. He's probably an AHL All-Star more than an NHL player. And that's kind of it until you look at Sam Poulin, who's, still in the queue. He might make the Penguins, the Pittsburgh Penguins, out of training camp. Nathan Legore is our reviews of his season were not good. And I mean not good. I mean bad. His skating did not improve. His work in the defensive zone was really lax this year. So we downgraded him, quite frankly. So you've got Sam Poulin and P.O. Joseph, and that's it in the Penguin system.
You like the kid that they grabbed from ASU, from Arizona State?
Oh, Maniscalco.
Yeah. Can't say the last name. That's why I didn't.
Sure, leave it to me, right?
Yes, sir.
We'll find out. Arizona State is not necessarily one of the college hockey blue bloods, right? So I'm always a little skeptical, or those kids have to prove a little bit more to me before I'm ready to anoint them as NHL ready. They like him. Even if he does have NHL stuff, he's probably a couple of years away, which is, let's be honest, 2 years from now is outside the Penguins championship window.
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of that, is Gino really on the trading block? You're hearing such different reports. One day he is, one day he isn't. He wants to end his career in Pittsburgh. He played such a fantastic regular season. And it almost seemed like he was one of those guys who just didn't buy into this bubble thing.
I don't know about the bubble thing. Obviously he had surgery right after the NHL postseason. I can't say playoffs because the qualifying round technically
freezing up.
It wasn't
okay.
Playoffs, but calling off Connor McDavid, then he might be on the block. But otherwise, no. Malkin is not on the block. That was brought up. That was pursued last summer. And ultimately, from Sidney Crosby getting involved and pulling the organization together, pulling the coaches, the GM, and Malkin together at the same table and having that come to Jesus meeting. And then, the ownership got involved too. What we've been told by sources inside the Penguins is that if Rutherford did revisit that line of thinking, that Mario, in fact, would probably shut it down too. Unless, of course, Connor McDavid were on the table. Yeah. But otherwise, no, Malkin's not being traded.
Yeah, I can't imagine. How about Letang? There were different reports about him this week. Again, Rutherford saying, I'm not trading him. He's part of the core. Then he's listening to offers. What's the real goal there?
Well, the real thing is nuance, right? That, in fact, Jim Rutherford is listening to offers on Kris Letang. He's not calling people up and saying, hey, what will you give me for Letang? I liken it to this. When you see like a performer or a comedian on stage say, no, don't applaud for me.
Yeah.
And wave with the other hand. That's kind of what Rutherford is doing. Knowing that the Penguins window is 2 years, they would have to get better in the next 2 years. And I just don't think trading Letang could get them there.
No, I agree. Even though he has his snafus and people want to complain about the things he does, there's nobody that's going to replace his positioning on that ice. And quite frankly, when he's with Dumoulin, is there a better pair?
Well, not with the Penguins, certainly. And they're probably a top 10 pairing in the NHL.
Yeah.
When they're going. They're really good.
Right. Matt Murray, let's talk about him now a little bit. I know you've been writing about him, talking about him. I know you said his value has changed now somewhat. I know when who was it that got knocked out of the playoffs? You were enamored with it. I can't remember.
Colorado.
Yeah, right. When Colorado got knocked out. Share a little bit about what you know about Matt Murray. He's probably going to be the guy that's moved.
Yeah, we know that Colorado kicked the tires at the trade deadline. We were all over that back in February and March. Colorado had been watching Tristan Jarry, as everybody assumed that it was Matt Murray's net until somewhere, in November, when the dynamics changed for everybody and everything. We know that Colorado kicked the tires, and they promised to stay in touch with Jim Rutherford. Joe Sakic and Jim were kind of going back and forth, building towards a draft day deal. COVID obviously changes that a little bit, but Colorado is not entirely sold on Philip Grubauer. Injury history, soft play, soft goals, all the things that the Penguins fans kind of hang on Matt Murray. Colorado is internally a little bit frustrated with Grubauer about. So they were ready to jump on Murray, but they're ready to jump on Murray at their price,
okay,
not Penguins' price. And so like any good deal, right? You go back and forth, you negotiate. I think Rutherford has been trying to build a little bit of an auction, trying to pull Edmonton in, trying to pull Calgary. Toronto is floating there in a very weird sort of situation where if they trade their goalie, they're going to come after Murray. But if they trade their goalie, it kind of brings the market price down, and it's a little bit convoluted. Murray is not going to fetch what the Penguins had hoped he was going to fetch even, I think, a few weeks ago. His playoff performance was probably the nail in that coffin.
Is there any chance that he can bring them a number one? I mean, we've sold the farm on that already.
Yeah, there's a chance. A late first round. Colorado has the 27th overall pick, and I think it is Ottawa that has like the 28th over. They have the Islanders' first overall pick. So the longer the Islanders play, the worse that first pick gets, which maybe puts it in the stratosphere to offer to the Penguins. So it's possible.
Okay.
I'm not going to count it, but I wouldn't bet much on it.
Okay. Let's talk about Jack Johnson then. Speaking of trades, Jack Johnson going to be a Penguin next year. I mean, I know we're all clamoring. Well, he was on the ice for 5 of Montreal's 8 even strength goals or something like that. I mean, he really looked lost out there in those playoffs or those prelims or whatever you want to call them.
Sure. And that's why we did the play breakdowns, because yes, Jack Johnson was on the ice, and Twitter certainly made a big deal of that. Yeah. But if you go a little bit deeper into it, Mark, Jack Johnson was kind of the last line of defense. Justin Schultz, Patrick Marleau, Evgeny Malkin were the 3 guys kind of on those 5 goals who missed their assignment. So I struggle to use diplomatic language when Twitter is in one of their little temper tantrums and their uproars over Jack Johnson. The reality is that Johnson was solid. He did his job. He was left out to dry by 4 other guys on the ice. But it looks like Johnson was terrible because he's the guy standing near the net when the puck goes in, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I think a lot of fans see is Johnson fishing the puck out, and they assign that blame. And the Twitter tastemakers who were dead set against the free agent signing last July or 2 Julys ago, rather, are terminally trying to prove their point on Jack Johnson. And so no matter what the poor guy does, good game, bad game, sure, it's a bad game.
Yeah.
And I wish I could change the dynamics of that, because I think Johnson had played really well until mid-January. And coincidentally, or not coincidentally rather, that's when they paired Johnson with Kris Letang. And that pairing was an abomination. Yeah, they should have broken that up after a week, but they let it linger for almost 6 weeks. And it crushed Johnson's advanced stats, that actually to that point were pretty good.
Right. I just don't, I'm with you. I don't see, watching the game, analyzing what he's doing, I don't see the things that people actually want to point the finger at him doing wrong. For example, the one goal, it was early on the series, Aston Reese blew his assignment, and it looks like Johnson, when he checked somebody in, I can't remember exactly how that played itself out, but Johnson was the scapegoat on that. I think that was it the overtime one?
No, but that was game 1 when Aston Reese came too deep into the zone. Yeah. Even Sullivan said our forward came too deep, but that was kind of, that information was DOA, in the public arena. So it is what it is. Pittsburgh hockey now. I'll always do my best to offer the truth. I'm not going to praise Jack Johnson if he doesn't deserve it. I'm not going to kick him when he doesn't deserve it. And, sometimes just to set the record straight, when the kicking gets a little too fierce, I'll break it down. And for the interested parties, I'll show what really happened. I
think you do a great job of pointing things out. Honestly, I do. And I think that's what's kept me level-headed about watching his game when he is on the ice. Speaking of that third pairing, Schultz headed out the door. didn't have a good series, and then Rutherford throws a little gas on the fire, kicks him on his way out the door. What was that about? Was there some bad blood there or something?
Yeah, you know what? The locker room wondered what that was about too. And I apologize, the light's getting a little bit. I guess the sun's going down faster than I anticipated out here. But
I can see you.
Good. Yeah, the locker room was not happy with the way Rutherford tossed Schultz under the bus. And at least one Penguins player who may or may not be traded this offseason made a pretty snarky comment to us about it as well. Like, oh, I guess you might kick me out, kick my butt out the door too, like this. So the players noticed, and the players weren't very appreciative of that.
And which line would that player be skating on? First, second, third, or fourth?
Well, there are more than skaters as well. There are guys who wear big pads. There's goalies. There's defensemen. There's forwards. I'm not going to tell you.
Oh, I got you.
I'm not going to – no, don't read too much into it. I'm covering all bases here, all right?
Okay. That's interesting to hear that. I guess Rutherford is a little bit disgruntled too at this point. So, recognizing the Penguins are cap strapped, any free agents that they can actually target or they can re-sign any of these guys that they have. I mean, please let Sheary walk. He just doesn't fit, or at least doesn't appear to fit. A lot of whiffing on great passes from Sid, and he's still
Connor is not going to be a Penguin next season. Perhaps if he signs a league minimum sort of deal, I really see him as suited for the KHL, quite frankly, or even maybe the Swiss League. No, the Penguins, unless the Penguins are able to find a way to free up several $1 million, I just don't see how they can engage on the free agent market. There's some defensemen there. You'd like to see them maybe take a run at Trevor Daley, or I don't know what Kevin Shattenkirk might cost next year. I think his price goes up by the game at this point.
He is playing well.
But yeah, those guys, if they can find $1.5 million, they can probably get a third pairing defenseman. But I also think they might try to go with Chad Ruedel next season.
Interesting. Not even give Yuso a shot at it. I mean, I know,
Yuso is not good on the right side.
Right.
He's a lefty, and even though he played some right side defense over in Finland, when they put him in an NHL game on the right side, they really weren't happy with the results of that. So he's a left sider almost exclusively.
What do you think they target with the second round pick now that they have, since that first round pick is a wash?
Well, they don't have a second round pick, I don't believe either.
Oh.
I think they've got someone else's third round pick.
Okay.
And to be honest, I have no idea who they're going to target. You're starting to talk, somewhere the 75th overall pick.
Yeah.
We can't predict the first round picks. I'm not going to try for the 75th overall.
Sounds like an ECHL guy maybe at the most. So opening night, if we're going to deep dive into the defensemen, we're going to go what? Letang, Dumoulin. We're going to look at possibly Marino and who at that second pairing.
Well, I think it's Pettersson.
Okay. And then the third pairing at this point is going to be Jack Johnson, and who knows, right?
Jack Johnson, Chad Ruedel. The way it's looking right now, unless the Penguins can, in fact, find a few dollars.
Okay. And that'll be interesting. Who skates with Sid and Gensel to start the season next year?
Maybe I'm different from the Penguins coaches. I don't see how they can possibly put Zucker with Malkin any longer. I don't see any chemistry. I don't see any sort of results with that pairing. We saw extraordinary results with Gensel and Malkin, and we saw some decent results with Zucker and Crosby. So if you're building your top six for maximum effect, you put Gensel with Malkin and Zucker with, on the left side of Crosby.
I like that though, and always did of Malkin, Gensel, and Rust. That was very dynamic. It'll be so now you're looking at who's going to be with Zucker and Crosby. Who is it going to be? Kapanen?
Yeah, I don't. Look, it could be Rust. It could be Kapanen. I think you're going to see a lot of that next season. Mike Sullivan likes to juggle the lines a little bit based on hot hands, based on how a guy is playing. So, he's never going to be one to lock in 4 solid lines. But if you're asking, predominantly, I think Rust and Malkin have a little connection that's pretty good.
Okay. But we know the third line is critical for the Penguins team, and they can't seem to find that third line center. It doesn't seem like McCann's back. I don't know if they have the money for him. And if he doesn't go, or if he does go, let's see he goes. Is Bukestad going to be the guy?
I don't know what they do. I think they've painted themselves into a corner, right?
Yeah.
McCann is not a third-line center. He's not an overly productive winger either. He's a guy with a lot of talent, but the rubber isn't necessarily meeting the road. And Nick Bukestad has not been the same. We talked to a few folks in Florida, kind of compared and contrasted his game from – he had some concussion issues a few years ago down in Florida, and he hasn't been the same player since. Not as rough and tumble, not as aggressive over the last few years. Hornquist and Bukestad had a nice chemistry last season, and the Penguins, if they're forced to go to that, might hope that they can rekindle that. But that's such a tough situation. You'd like to see them be able to almost wipe the slate clean on that third line and start fresh. But, which 2 they keep, I have no idea.
Would they entertain moving Hornquist? I mean, you won't have anybody in front of that net. You won't. I mean, he's such a presence there for you. He brings that grit that you desperately need, which they didn't get against Montreal until he stepped his game up. I mean,
yeah. I don't know how you trade Patrick Hornquist. By the same token, Thursday afternoon, I kind of laid it all out on Pittsburgh hockey now. I went through dollars and cents, and I don't know how you trade him. I also don't know how you afford him. So, it's a bad situation that Jim Rutherford is now in, partially, not mostly, but partially because of the Kapanen trade. Has given away some of his assets that he could have used to send away other salaries. But now they're kind of stuck in this mode where they're going to have $2, really to add $10 worth of players.
So he just painted himself into a corner, which he was known for in Carolina. He dissipated that team after they had won their cup, and a lot of people point the finger at that consistently. So we'll see. I know he got a pass there for a while after winning back-to-back cups, but it's not actually him that wins the back-to-back cups. It's the players, right? So.
Oh, look, to win a Stanley Cup, you need everything from the GM to the video coach, all clicking. And Rutherford did take a lot of guff down in Carolina. He made some really, a couple really bad moves. Alexander Semin and a 5-year, $35 million contract.
That one
brings to mind. But, that I would caution fans about going too much to that example, however, because also to win that Stanley Cup, they had to mortgage a lot of their future to acquire Doug Weight and Mark Recchi. And there's a defenseman that's might have been Glenn Wesley, that they had to just give away a couple years of future in exchange for that Stanley Cup, which they gladly paid.
Hey, did Ron Francis build that team that's functioning down there now? Does he get any credit for that?
Well, sure. Sebastian Aho and those young guys, they're a really good team. But Don Waddell, the GM, has also done a very good job too.
Who do you like in the Cup Finals? Probably Tampa and Vegas. You like Tampa and Vegas, or do you think Dallas is going to run?
Mark, I don't know who's going to win the West. I mean, quite frankly, that's a heck of a balanced series. Dallas is getting tougher and tougher to beat, and Vegas is the better team, but Dallas just has something right now, you know? And when a team gets a little bit of destiny and mojo on their side, all of a sudden, you know, they get about a foot taller and a couple feet faster.
Don't they remind you of St. Louis from last year? I mean, I've been watching it, and they have that – they got that size, that speed. They just – you're right. They're just clicking on all cylinders right now. That's such a good series. I'm enjoying that so much. All right, so my last real question to you, what's this team need going forward to return to Cup form? I mean, I know it's a lot per se, but, you know, money's not going to be the thing that helps them. What do they need, the Penguins, going forward to return to Cup form?
I don't think it's feasible, actually. You know, the reality is I think Penguins fans are going to have to resign themselves to the fact they're going to have a long, slow goodbye with their star players. You know, Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin might help some guys rebuild in a few years, might help some young players along. I'm not of the notion that the right move or the right free agent can spark this dynasty for one more run. It really would be unprecedented. Every, you know, the dynasties we've seen get two gasps at it. The Penguins had their first gasp in 08, 09. Yeah. They got one out of the deal, and obviously 16, 17, they got two more. To ask for a third helping would be completely unprecedented. I can't think of a hockey dynasty in the last 50 years that got a third bite at the apple. You know, Montreal had their two. The Islanders had their one bite. Edmonton had two bites at the apple. And, you know, Boston is now on their second bite of the apple, you know, making it to the Cup final last year. I don't think you get a third one.
It hurts not winning that the lottery and getting Lafreniere. I thought that would be a nice linchpin to start building forward again for them.
Well, sure, yeah. There were 8 teams sitting there praying to God that they got Lafreniere. The Rangers are going to be stacked going forward. In fact, it might make a couple guys like Pavel Buchnevich available. Maybe even Chris Kreider goes back on the trade block because they got Lafreniere.
All right. So I do this last segment, and I want you to work along with me here. The 5 most important things that need to happen this offseason for them to at least have some sort of shot, not only making the playoffs, but even having a sniff at getting to the Cup finals next year. What are the 5 most important things in your opinion, Dan?
They have to solidify the third line center. They've got to find a good one. They have to solidify that third line, or the third pairing defensively. I don't know that Jack Johnson is the guy. Maybe Juuso Riikola with a good right-sider is the guy. They find some dynamism there. They find a way for the defenseman to contribute some offense. You watch Montreal blast the Penguins off the ice by getting contributions from their blue line. The Penguins need so much more from their backside. Those are really, I think, the biggest things. Tristan Jarry, obviously, next year is going to have to play out of his skates. He's going to have to be that .925 save percentage guy in the regular season and in the playoffs.
Are you confident in that?
I haven't seen the holes in his game that I saw in Matt Murray's when he was a young guy.
Yeah.
Like, we knew Murray had some holes. We knew he was a good goalie, but we knew he had some holes. I see Tristan Jarry right now as a guy who's going to get better, not worse.
Okay.
However, it takes one shooter to figure something out as well. And you know, that house of cards comes crashing, but I don't think that's Tristan Jarry. I also think that Sullivan and the core leadership have to really kind of have that kumbaya moment as well. There's not rancor, there's not anger or hatred or, you know, tuning out, but they really have to decide amongst all of them that they really want it. And if they can decide that they really want it, and are willing to bleed for it one more time, then they've got a shot. But that goes against human nature, doesn't it?
Yeah, they need to find what they had at the beginning of this past season in the second part of the season next year. Like most teams that take that good run, they start in March and they build that chemistry and you just find a way to win each and every game, whether you're behind a goal or you're up 3. It's, that's what the Penguins were about. Just like we talked about earlier, they need to find that in March and April again, because we certainly haven't seen it the last few years, have we?
No, they're sated is maybe the best word I can use.
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on the show, Dan. You've been fantastic. Dan Kingerski from Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Make sure you check out his stuff. Follow him on Twitter, Instagram. He's all over the place, and he's got some great tidbits for us almost on a daily basis. So good luck going forward with all your hockeys now. I know you got several of them out there, and I enjoy reading the Pittsburgh one especially. So thanks again.
Thank you, Mark.